Hi everyone, in this video we are gonna look at how to improve the code quality of a Swift project with pre-commit along with SwiftFormat and SwiftLint. The setup works fine on my Mac, but yours might differ slightly, so feel free to adjust as needed. We'll try this out using the default iOS template that comes with SpriteKit and Xcode. Let's start by creating a new project. Let's call it pre-commit hooks, and make sure source control is checked so that the project is set up with Git. Now, let's take a look at pre-commit. It's a tool that lets us automatically run checks or formatting steps every time we commit code so that we can catch bugs early and keep things clean. You can install it by following the official instructions, but if you are using Homebrew, you can just use the brew command to install it. Once installed, we run pre-commit install in the project directory, and this will ensure that pre-commit will run with every git commit. So now let's add some hooks from the pre-commit GitHub repo. These are out-of-the-box hooks. They are very simple but can be quite useful. Now we'll create a pre-commit config YAML file and define the hooks we want, like fixing trailing whitespace and line endings, validating JSON, XML, and YAML files, sorting YAML keys, removing byte order markers, preventing large files and Git submodules, and detecting merge config markers. And since these hooks run only on stage files during commit, it's a good idea to first run them on the whole project using pre-commit run A. You'll probably see some failures. For example, it might clean up whitespace or fix line endings automatically. We can check what changed by running git status, and to see the exact edits, we can just run git diff. Then, when we run pre-commit run A again, everything should pass. Now, let's commit our changes, including the pre-commit config YAML file. We can see that all checks pass as expected during commit, but just so that you know, if you ever need to skip them, you can run git commit no verify. Now, let's take a quick look at SwiftFormat. If you go to its GitHub page, you'll see that it's a tool that helps format Swift code by removing redundant self, adjusting parentheses, reflowing comments, and more. You might have also seen Apple's official formatter at swiftlang/swiftformat. Feel free to try that one. It's a promising tool, but last I checked, it wasn't quite as mature or full-featured as Nick Lockwood/swiftformat. But still, I think it's worth keeping an eye on. Before we add SwiftFormat to our pre-commit setup, let's also check out SwiftLint. If we go to its GitHub page, we'll see it described there as a tool to enforce Swift style and conventions. In other words, SwiftLint can find issues like force casts, missing braces, unused code, and so on. We could add both SwiftFormat and SwiftLint to our pre-commit configuration as remote hooks again, but I found it more reliable, and especially with SwiftLint, to use Mint instead. Mint is a package manager for Swift command line tools, and unlike Homebrew, for example, it's very easy to run specific versions of these tools without affecting your system. As before, if you are using Homebrew, you can install Mint with it easily. And after installing it, we'll create a Mint file in the project and specify all the packages and versions we want. Then run mint bootstrap to install all the packages. It may take a couple of minutes, but once this is done, we can continue. So we can now go back to our pre-commit configuration and add SwiftFormat as a local repo hook. And as the entry point, we define that it will run using Mint. Before we try it out though, we'll first create a .swiftformat file. And in that file, we at least need to define the version of Swift language we use in our project. But I also like to set the maximum number of characters per line to match the default used by SwiftLint. Now, let's run pre-commit for all files again, and we can see that SwiftFormat modified some of the files. As we did before, we can use git status again to see what's changed, and we can use git diff to see the exact edits. As you can see, the files have been reformatted, but they should still be working as they did before. If we run the hooks again, you'll see that everything will pass now. So let's commit the changes, including the min file and SwiftFormat file, and you'll see that everything passes. Next up is SwiftLint. We'll add it to the pre-commit configuration the same way as we did SwiftFormat. And to only see the actual issues, we can pass this quiet flag to SwiftLint. If we run pre-commit for all files now, you'll see that it will find a few things. You can see a force cast error, an issue with an identifier name, and an issue with opening brace spacing. So let's start addressing these issues. First, we create a swiftlint.yaml file, and we can configure here what we want the lint to ignore. For example, personally, I don't really mind one-letter variable names if the context is clear, so I like to set the minimum number of characters to 1. As for the opening brace rule, there's a conflict between how SwiftFormat and SwiftLint want to format the code. So given the fact that we use SwiftFormat for formatting, I like to disable this rule and some other rules that I found to be conflicting. We can now test the configuration by running pre-commit again, and we'll see that the only issue remaining is the force cast violation. So, as you may know, force casting with S exclamation mark can crash your app if the cast fails. So, a safer option would be to use S question mark and optional binding. In our case, game view controller has 1 force cast and game scene has 3. So, for example, we can fix these by switching to optional casting. If we now run pre-commit for all files again, we'll see that all hooks will pass. We can now commit everything, including SwiftLint, and we'll see that all hooks will pass as well. There's one more thing I'd like to mention about SwiftLint, and that is that it supports some opt-in rules. As the name suggests, these rules aren't enabled by default, and you can enable them one by one, or you can enable all of them and disable the ones you don't like. In either case, make sure to pass strict to SwiftLint to ensure that the hook will fail on these rules. So, to sum it all up, personally, I really think that using pre-commit with SwiftFormat and SwiftLint is a great way to catch mistakes early, to keep things consistent, and to have overall smoother experience when coding. I hope this was useful. Thanks for watching.